double act tonight. Thank you, everybody. Sorry it's so crowded, but it's brilliant to see you all here. Try and make yourselves as comfortable as you can. And it's brilliant to see such an appetite for a Thai political program. I mean, Thai politics has been pretty much in hibernation for the last nearly 4 years now, actually. And in fact, we wondered this evening whether we'd even be allowed or able to hold this event. And we're very grateful that we can. Nobody's tried to suggest we can't. We felt that it was important to bring in younger Thais, and many of you who've been looking at the media will be very well aware of this young man on my right, Thanatorn, who has founded a new party, Future Forward, and is seen by so many Thais as a fresh and hopeful face for the future. And we felt it was very timely to bring in younger members of political parties, people who are actually working within party politics, who can give us their thoughts on what they think should happen once normal politics is resumed in Thailand. And we all hope and expect that will happen within 2 or 3 months. Nobody's quite sure when the next election will be, but February is still the touted date for next year. I'm not going to give a long intro. I will just let you know a little bit about our 4 speakers tonight. Thanathorn Juangroongruangkit needs very little introduction, given the amount of publicity he's had. I hope when he starts speaking, he might tell us a little bit about some of the things he's done. He's actually had quite an interesting life and mixed with a lot of different people, and has clearly thought very deeply about what he thinks his country now needs. So we're delighted to have him here. Next to him, Lieutenant Prichapon Pongpanit is from a very political family. He was the youngest MP in the 2011 election, and he's from the Pheu Thai party, but I can tell you that I've seen very strong positive feedback from a number of people who watched him as an MP about his commitment to Khon Kaen, to his constituency. I asked him just now what he'd been doing since the military coup, given that politics had stopped, and he said, I'm doing what I was doing before. I'm trying to help my constituency, I'm trying to help the people of Khon Kaen, and clearly he's committed to do that once normal electoral politics is restored. Next to him we have Varavut Silpa-archa. His family name needs no introduction at all. In fact, those of us, I won't include myself because I haven't been here that long, but some of our longer standing members may even remember when his father Banharn was briefly Prime Minister and did actually visit the club with one of our Prime Minister's dinners. So he, again, a very established political family, Chat Thai Patronage, stronghold in Suphanburi, a traditional party, but Khun Top has a very fresh view on what his party should be doing in the future Thai political constellation. And at the very end, we have Khun Parit Aitim Wacharasin. He said to me he doesn't particularly like being too closely associated with his obvious family resemblance, but some of you who will remember when his uncle was Prime Minister. He's now very active in the Democrat Party, again pushing for a fresh view of politics and a fresher approach by the party. The Democrats are, of course, the oldest party in Thailand, but they have, as much as any other party, been affected by the polarized politics of the last 15 years. And of course, we are likely to see at least a faction of the Democrats probably break away under Suthep Thaugsuban, who's forming his own party. So their own future and what kind of party they're going to be is probably at least as open as that of any other. And with that, Khun Thanatorn, you've all got 10 minutes. Could I ask you just to outline your own view about how politics should be?
Khun Jonathan. Thank you very much, everyone. It's an honor for me to be here tonight. Before I'm starting my presentation today, I would like to say that actually I'm a bit nervous to be here tonight. But well, we are. When we started this political party, it was back in January this year. Professor Priyuwit and we together had a discussion about how hopeless our societies and how people would like to see an alternative. We decided on one one late night in January. So our journey is short. We are talking about something less than 3 months. We haven't prepared anything before prior to January that night. So everything you have seen is the result of less than 3 months work of us. The popularity we gained over the last 3 months also, I would not take the whole credit for that. I think it is because the people in this very country has been oppressed for so long and they are looking for something new. So it's not about, so I think this movement is not about Ajahn Piyabut and I. It's what people want. People want to be free again. People want to see alternative again. People want to see parliament work again. So I would like to spend the next 10 minutes sharing with you my thoughts on the society we want to see, my thought on where we come from. So first, I want to give you our analysis about the current status of our society. We see that on one hand, a big group of people don't like election, don't like to see, don't have faith in the parliamentary politics, because if there is an election, it is most likely that a party related to Kun Thaksin will come back to power. On the other hand, we have another group of people who lost all their faith in the government organs, in the juridical organs. They don't have faith in court anymore. They don't have faith in the police. They don't have faith in the state attorneys. They believe that these institutions, when they make decisions, those decisions are made, they are politically motivated decisions. So we see a group of, two groups of people on a very extreme end of beliefs. For us, if the upcoming election, there's no alternative, there is no way that we can exit the current conflict. So we see ourselves as an alternative to the two major parties. We believe that conflicts are normal in any democracies in the world. We have 70 million people here in this country, and there is no way you can make these 70 million agree even on one single issue. So that's not possible. There's conflicts. There will always be conflicts. There will always be disagreements. The problem is that you don't have to solve this conflict with the power, with the undemocratic power. You don't have to solve this conflict with barrels of the guns. You cannot. My life, I'm turning 40 this year. I have gone through 5 military attempts. You believe it or not? So on average, 8 years for one military coup d'etat. This pattern is a troubling pattern. Every 8 years you have one coup d'etat. We have to say, somebody in this society have to say enough is enough. We cannot pass over the society, this society, to the next generation. They do not deserve it. So, for us, we would like to convince people of all colors to come back and have faith in parliamentary democracy. We know that on one hand, people who supported the PDIC, on one hand, you have a group of people who supported PDRC, and I totally understand their feeling, their dislike of the corruption. I totally understand it. But our history, I mean human history, has proven that better democracies are better at fighting corruption. This much is clear. So what we need is more democracy, not less democracy. What we need is a free and fair election that would bring a true democracy to this society. That is what our party would strive for. That is what the founding members of this party believe. Out of, if you know, let's use some common sense here. If coup d'etat can solve this conflict, Thailand would have been the most prosperous countries in the world because we have the highest numbers of coup d'etat in our histories, right? So if coup d'etat can solve problems, then all of us, all of the Thai people would be rich, very rich by now. So it is proven that military government, unelected powers, cannot solve problems. So it's time for us to say enough. Once this military government goes back to their barracks, we have to make sure that they will not ever again seize the power from elected government in the future. So since I have very little time, I can go on and on talking about other policies that our party want to pursue, something like decentralization, something like unlocking the economic potential, something like social equity, something like social welfare. I can go on and on with this, but the basis, the starting point is here. We need a democratic society. That's the beginning. Unless and until we secure this condition, all other conditions will be untrue. If you talk about welfare, if you talk about all other things, without talking about bringing democracy back in this society, you are not true to yourself, at least in my opinion. So, how? The question is how? The question is how? Democracy does not equal to protesting against military government. Democracy does not equal to rejecting outside prime minister. But rejecting outside prime minister, protesting against current military government is a good start. Since we have many political representatives from many political parties on this panel, I would like to see a pledge. I would call it a pledge to restore democracy in this country. First of which, and I have 4 points here. Point number 1, we have to demand free and fair election in February 2019. Second, after the election, all the pro-democracy political parties must insist that outside prime minister will not be implemented. The third point will be that pro-democracy political parties together collectively propose to form a new constitution drafting assembly elected by the people to draft a new constitution, then put the new draft into a referendum. Number 4, all the pro-democracy political parties together demand the change in the current military bills. These 4 points, one pledge, one goal to restore democracy back to our country. Why I proposing this? Because if you look at the modern division of people's power, you see we have a executive branch, Second of which is the, how you call it, judicial branch. And third of which is the legislative branch. These are the three divisions of power in modern politics. Executive branch. The current executive branch is governed by a 20-year strategic development plan. So elected government cannot pursue the policies they want. Second, the legislative branch. We have fought for so hard and so long to make senators elected by the people. Before the 1997 constitution, senators in Thailand were appointed. Only after the 1997 constitution was implemented, senators are elected. And now we are going back full circle to a society prior to the 1997. Third, the judicial power. This branch, the judges under this constitution, they elected themselves. They co-elected each other. And there is no link or whatsoever with the people. Having said that, the NCPO regime will continue to live with us, even if Prime Minister Prayut stepped it down. So that's why I'm proposing the change to the current constitution. Us alone cannot do it. Pheu Thai have already tried that a few years back. It needs the power of all of us to do this together. This is not for me, not my political party, but for a new future of our country. We need to change. We need to change the constitution. We need to make sure that the military power is reduced after this. So, going forward, if once we can conduct political activities, I will propose this pledge to all political parties in Thailand, particularly pro-democracy parties. One pledge, 4 points, one goal to restore democracy back in this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I was going to move along the table, but I'm concerned that obviously Pheu Thai will probably echo a lot of those points. I hope if just for the moment, Kun Pom, we could just go over to Kun Top. And, you know, Kun Top, your party is an old-style party, and indeed your father would be, I think, not unfairly described as an old-style politician. Kun Thanatorn has laid down, Kun Ek has laid down a challenge there. Will you take it up?
Thank you, Jonathan. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, members of the press, and the members of FCCT. First of all, I'm very glad that I'm not the only one who's actually nervous this evening. Kun Thanatorn as well. I mean, my heart rate is about 117 right now, so forgive me if I kind of mumble a little bit this evening. But anyway, politics. Some people would say that I'm the new face into politics. But actually, I've been involved in politics since I was born, really. In 1973, I was born. 1976, my father ran his first election campaign. I was 3 years old, and I actually handed out flyers when I was 3. And, you know, it's not child labor or anything, but I've been involved in politics ever since I could remember anything. I officially entered into politics when I was 27, and now somehow I ended up here. So in the past, you know, a lot of things happened in Thai politics. Kun Thanatorn mentioned all the numbers of the coup d'etat and the mistakes that the previous generations of politicians were made. I do not argue with the fact that some of the pictures that were painted on the politicians are pretty bad today. And, you know, on behalf of most of the politicians, I do apologize to the people of Thailand and to the international community. But where we are today is the result of, you know, of the actions that precipitates into today's situation. military comes out of their barracks and started to take over, and things are where we are now. How are we going to cure, make sure that such problem will not happen again? How we'll see Thai politics after the next general election, whenever that will come? It's just that, after the next general election, the biggest problem is how to make sure that such coup d'etat doesn't happen again. In the past, the classic example, the classic excuse or reason that the military would use in order to start a coup d'etat is because there has been an unrest in the country. Politicians has done so much corruption, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And hence, they have to take over, and then they have to resume their power. So in the future, to make sure that such thing doesn't happen again, we have to make sure that the political situation and within the arena doesn't cause such chaos again. I mean, like 4 years ago, when General Prayut took over, there was a big argument, between the opposition and the government. Back then was Prime Minister Yingluck. And they couldn't come to an agreement, so General Prayut apologized and said, "I'm sorry, but I have to take over now." And that's what he did. And ever since, the reason for the military to stay on was because there has been a disagreement and all these political mumbo-jumbo in Thailand. That is why the military still stays. Now going forward, really in order to improve the situation in Thailand, we got to improve the standard of the politicians in Thailand. The biggest problem, how to improve that situation, how to improve the quality of politicians in Thailand. Ladies and gentlemen, no one does that, I did it myself. If you have a basket of banana, you pick up a representative from that basket, you get a banana. You have a basket of oranges, you close your eyes and you pick up something from that basket, you get an orange. You have a country where 80% of the population, or 90% of the population, are, farmers, agriculturally related industries. Some of them don't even go to schools. Some of them have different ideas of the word politics, some different ideas of the word democracy. So if you have you have the whole population full of farmers and something like that, if you want to get a good representative of them, you will not get a PhD candidate out of that basket. You will not be able to get a doctor out of that basket. Sometimes people would say, how come that politician is bad? How come that politician, behave in such a radical way? But people still love them. People in his constituents still love them. It's because he actually represents them. He actually, knows their way of life. He knows how they live. He knows how they breathe. He knows how they think. And he actually responds to their need. So in the future, from now on, in order to really make sure that politicians' standard is elevated, I believe that education would be the key into the future. Last year, a PISA survey out of 70, almost 100 countries in the world, ranked Thailand on the education level as number 77 on the list. Vietnam is number 6 on the list. That means that 10 years from now, Vietnam is going to it's going to be a country full of fully educated people. And Thailand, we're still stepping on the same good old road. 10 years from now, we're still debating the same problem. We'll probably see another coup d'etat or many more if the standard of living, if the standard of education is still the same. You're still crunching out the same group of people. The system's still crunching out the same group of, education. So in order to really improve the situation in the future, I truly believe that the people should receive a better education, knows what they really want. It's just like just like a Maslow triangle, ladies and gentlemen. At the moment, if you go into the rural, people doesn't really care who runs the country. I represent the people in Suphanburi. I know that as long as they can sell their rice for close to 10,000 baht a ton, who can be the prime minister, they don't really care. They want to know what they're going to eat tomorrow. Will their children be fed? Will there be electricity? If they turn on the tap, twist the tap, will there be water supply? That is what they are concerned about. Will their kids be able to go to school? Will their kids get a good education? Once all that are fulfilled, then they'll start thinking about democracy. Then they'll start thinking about, who will run the country? What would Thailand look like in the eyes of the internationals? But until then, we still have quite a distance to go. So after the next general election, I strongly recommend we do something about our education. Stop going to school from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the evening. Stop doing all this extra tuition thing. Let's really start on the kids, on the school, and we'll see the better future for Thailand. And also, come the next general election, the most classic questions I'm being asked now is the question of the outside prime minister or the inside prime minister. There's always been a debate like this. I'm sure I'm going to receive many of these questions after this too, so let me help you asking the question by saying that in the past, in the history of Thailand since I was born, there has been so many debates. Only about 6 or 7 years ago, there has been a cry for an external prime minister using Article 7 on the Constitution of Thailand, begging to get the external prime minister. And now we are asking for the inside person, outside person, inside person. So as for the Chathai Patana Party, we are not going to say 10 years ago, okay, we want the inside. Okay, 10 years later, we want the outside. What's going to happen 10 years from now? Are we going to do outside or inside again? Thai politics is very, very different. Last week, it was one thing. This week, it is another thing. Next week, God knows. People always talk about General Prayut is going to be in the picture. I don't even know if he's still going to be in the picture next year when there's a general election. So when the time comes for the general election, of course, the system clearly stated that we have to stick by the list of the nominees that each political parties are going to propose to the parliament. And that's what the Chathai Patana Party is going to do. Each political party will propose the name of the prime minister that they think should be fit to be the prime minister. We will propose one. I'm sure Pheu Thai will propose. Democrat will propose. Kun Thanatorn, as part of the Future Forward Party, will propose. Then we will discuss who is best suited and come up with a conclusion. If we reach the conclusion, it's okay. If not, then there is a second clause in the Constitution that we go forward from there. But then that's not up to anyone to decide. It's up to the entire parliamentary session to decide. So, in order to prevent all the, political mumbo-jumbos from happening again, I really do hope that, in the future, politics could, in the way I want Thai politics to move forward, to develop. But I remembered when I was young, politicians would fight like mad on the parliamentary floor. They would debate, they would, my goodness me, my father was even attacked for his nationality. One day I turned on a computer, I saw my grandfather's picture on the on the internet. He was attacked for 7 days and 7 nights, and at the end of the day, the person who attacked my father came and apologized, and life goes on. In the past, there were some relationships between political parties. Politics was not a cutthroat business back then. People would fight on the floor, but when they come out, we would sit and have drinks, we would have a laugh, we would go down the pub, have a pint together, and when we go back into the parliamentary session again, we would just fight head to head, believe in things that we do believe in. Unfortunately, politics nowadays is not. It has become a cutthroat business. Winner takes all. When I was young, I remembered being in a coalition is not 100% budget. You would get about 70 or 80%. The opposition would be able to receive about 20 or 30% of the budget, and life goes on. But then after a while, in the recent years, it has been winner takes all. Government takes 100%, opposition got 0. And when the stakes are that high, everyone goes all in. And since then, politics has always been a cutthroat business, one killing another. And I don't enjoy that kind of picture. Politics is all about talking. You know, there's negotiating the whip in the committees and everything is all the groundwork on the floor in the parliamentary session. How we will be, you know, negotiating on the bills, how things will be met, how things will be received. And that is how I see Thai politics, how I want Thai politics to be in the future. I want to be able to sit amongst my colleagues here, you know, and, you know, if I'm the opposition, he's in the coalition, and, you know, we'll sit together and have a dinner and talk about issues. I want to be able to sit with Kun Thanatorn, despite our different beliefs, you know, sitting together as a gentleman and talk. And ladies and gentlemen, I really do look forward to see all these gentlemen up here in the next parliamentary session, whether as a coalition, as friends in the opposition, as him in the government, as me in the opposition, or vice versa. But I want to see the new faces into the Thai politics.
You buy the first round.
I will buy the first round. And I also have to thank Kun Thanatorn for entering into the Thai politics, because you know, it makes the spotlight shine more on me, actually. Because my father passed away 2 years ago, and Chart Thai Patana Party decided to revamp our party, to rebrand our political party. There has been speculation that I will become the next leader of the political party, but then that's up to the party to decide. But one thing I can assure you is that come the next election, you will see an entirely new face into the executive members of the Chart Thai Patana Party. However, the current generations, the senior members would still stay. It's just like in the big company, big corporation, where the senior members will be the board members. And then the CEO, the CFO, the CIO, and the rest of the people would be the newer faces. And we said that 2 years ago, but it hasn't caught much attention of the public. Not until the introduction of Kun Thanatorn that everyone starts talking, and I think that's part of the reason why I'm being invited this evening. So thank you, Kun Thanatorn. Okay.
Thank you very much.
And that's about it, ladies and gentlemen. Thai politics is like a big soap opera. Anyone who's been in England or in Australia would probably know, like Neighbours, Home and Away. It goes on and on and on and on. Sometimes the good guy becomes the bad guy. Sometimes the bad guy becomes the good guy. And, you know, like in the past, the military was seen as a hero. Unfortunately, now there are some different opinions on the military. So now the good guy becomes the bad and the bad guy becomes the good. But one thing I strongly believe in is the power of the people and the will of the people. We are hitting some snags, we are hitting some potholes in this country, but we will prevail. Democracy will prevail in this country again. And after the next general election, I'm sure things will be better. One way or another, it will be better. You know, we are just going through a phase of development. It's not nice, it's not pretty, but we just have to live with it, bite our tongue and get on with it. And I want to get into the next election. And I hope that actually been some useful to you all. Thank you very much.
I'm not sure if I mistook it, but I always heard an argument there for politics in the old ways that it was done in the 1990s, but slightly different arguments. Kun Prichapon, you're from Pheu Thai. You guys were very caught up in the conflict that eventually led to the last coup. Everybody will be wondering how you're going to do things differently next time.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. First of all, I would like to say good evening, ladies and gentlemen. These two are not the only two that get nervous. You know, I'm pretty nervous as well, because this is my first time at the FCCT, and thank you so much for your warm welcome. I would say that many thanks to the FCCT for inviting me to participate in this forum, to share my views with colleagues and all of you. I was informed yesterday at 6 p.m. that I will have to make a speech about 10 minutes. Believe it or not, I didn't get enough sleep last night. I was trying to prepare my thoughts and my views to share with all of you. So, at the beginning here, I will state what I have prepared. And then when it's time for the Q&A, I'm more than welcome to answer any questions from all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, Thailand is in a very hard time through this political struggle and to go through this modern economic. So I would like to address several issues that Thailand needs to change before we are outdated. I would say that in present, every country around the globe is experiencing what we call the new reality. The reality of dramatic change in speed and character of technology for industrial production. The change from a country-based product to a network of global design, global sourcing, global production, and global market. The world market has been changed to the development of information, technology, infrastructure, and has been changed in the trade pattern due to the people's access to internet. Disruptive innovation is everywhere now. For example, technology, new form of business model, software, so-called sharing economy like Uber. We have to prepare Thailand for the new normal economy. Solving labor mismatches is a priority. Our party will support our people with the means to survive in this new economic phenomenon through rebalancing the economy from export investment-led to a more self-dependent, consumption service-led economy, and through providing more economic opportunity for our people. We must embrace technology in the world and improve technology to benefit all, especially for the poor. If we don't embrace technology, we could be left behind. We have been enjoying the GDP from tourism, from export, while the export situation in Thailand now is like a sun before setting, which is going down. If we don't create the new S-curve for a country, how long can we still enjoy the current one? This new S-curve must be technology related. The new generation therefore must step in and play a major role in this new economy, because those who have a decision-making power always have analog thinking. But those who have digital thinking always have no decision-making power. Therefore, the new generation must bridge the gap between the senior and the new generation by learning from their experiences and integrating with the new knowledge, innovation, and technology. To bridge the gap, Thailand needs to improve on at least three fundamentals, which are education, local economy, and politics. First is to reform of education. Since the education is the foundation of generating the country's economic growth. As you can see, our current situation, the education system is still what we call rote learning. In other words, is learning from memorizing. Today, even Thai people do not believe in Thai education system. You can see from parents, they choose, if they can afford, they will choose to send their children to international schools. What does that mean? It means that they don't believe in the system. In the current global trend, we match education with children's ability. The teacher must be ready to learn together with the children, the students. No more what we call mouth feeding. We must decentralize Thailand's education management to the provincial level and let the management role be to advise or to research on education technology like education cloud or applications. We must reform our education by adjusting the curriculum to match the global trend and integrating technology to improve the curriculum. For example, if a 15-year-old boy would like to be a robotic engineer when he grows up, the question is, which school in Thailand would be suitable for him? Therefore, bridging the gap of education is the path we must take. In summary on education, Thailand needs to do 5 things. First, decentralized education. Second, increase bilingual schools. Third, use IT technology to change the learning and teaching methods. Fourth, aware of convergence of sciences. The subject-based learning is not working anymore. And fifth, find a better quality of teachers, then set proper incentive and career path. Second, as the economy changes, the old prescription does not work anymore. However, the existing local economy still have a good foundation. We must upgrade our OTOP, our local product, from analog to digital. The new OTOP will be Thai skills, Thai accent, with international design through IT for global taste and global market, like Alibaba or Amazon style. Otherwise, OTOP products will meet a dead end. We must attach wings for our local products to be seen in the digital market. Connecting our local economy to the world is a key to success. Third, Thai politics needs the new generation who is nationalist, not a chauvinist. คลั่งชาตินะครับ We must value our national interest above politics. We need politicians who always think about next generation rather than those who only think about next election. We can think differently, but we must respect in each other differences. Like in the old day, Kun Varavut had stated, in the Thai parliament, when our fathers, our uncles acted upon their duty, for example, in a central debate, they seemed to be opposed to one another. But when off duty, they were still friends. But sadly, nowadays, it's not the same. We, as the new generation, must create the new culture by respecting the rules and regulations to set good examples and standards for other generation. At the same time, Thailand is in serious need for what we call reform of due process and rule of laws. We all need to stop witch hunting, those who think different than us. All must be equal before the law. The law must not be executed with double standard. All Thais must have equal protection under the same law, because the laws and resources are here to benefit the citizen and sovereign state, not are here to protect the military regime. As Charles de Montesquieu, a French political philosopher, once stated, there is no crueler tyranny than that which is perpetuated under the shield of law and in the name of justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kun Porman. Last but definitely no means least, one of the younger members of the oldest party. I think everyone will be very keen to hear your perspectives, having listened, you had a chance to listen to the others now, not just about what your party would do, but also what you yourself personally think should happen to Thai politics.
Hi.
You're on.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for having me. Before I start outlining what I was going to say tonight, I think I'll just make two quick comments based on what was said earlier. I think Kun Top was very right to say that Kun Thanatorn's decision to enter politics has led to our invitations tonight. I actually had a look at the Facebook link of this event late last night. And I think actually if you flash it up on the screen, it's actually in front of me right now. I don't know how. Yes, no. But if you go onto the Facebook event, you'll see that the event there, right? When I saw this and I was told I was invited here, I thought I'd been ambushed to join the Future Forward Party.
It's not my intention.
Yeah, no, of course not your intention, I understand. And the second point I make is that everyone said that they have been very nervous, or they're very nervous about speaking here tonight. Can I just say that I probably have equal reason to be nervous. Not only am I newest to politics, newest to Thailand, I'm also newest to the world. And while Kun Prichapon was informed last night that he has to make a 10-minute speech at 6 p.m. Yesterday, I was informed about half an hour ago. So unfortunately, I don't have a prepared folder of notes to actually support me tonight. So you'll have to bear with my freestyle. But I want to talk tonight about three things, right? We hear a lot in Thailand about this word new, right? And new has been often associated with something which is better. Now, I believe that new is very important, but it's not necessarily always better. So tonight I'm going to talk about three new things of which I will be a member. Number one is I'm going to be a member of the new generation. And by that I mean a set of people who have grown up with BBMs and MSN instead of letter writing. Right? The second organization or group of which I am a member is a member of new politicians, which is fresh faces in the field. And finally, I am here tonight as a member of what you can say is the New Democrat. Now, I use that word very, very carefully because I am not here, and I would not be here if I was asked to be here as a member of the Democrat Party of the old. I am only comfortable saying that I'm here as a member of the New Democrat. I'll go into what I mean by that in a second. Right. Let me talk first about my position as a member of the new generation. Now, the phrase new generation in Thailand, which is kon run mai, has been used many, many times over the past few months and years to talk about how, as a member of the younger generation of society, we can push for issues that we might care more about than the older generation. I feel that we have to be very careful here. It's very important that younger people push for issues they care for, but we also have to be very conscious of preferences of older generations, especially given that we are going to an aging society where very, very soon 1 in 3 people are going to be over the age of 60. We cannot present new generation as a divisive front on which to confront the older generation. Let me give you one anecdote of why I have this belief. My parents are both state hospital doctors. I had a chance to talk to one of my mum's colleagues about 2 weeks ago. He came up to me and he said the hospital he was working at was undergoing a digital transformation. The whole system is being revamped. Everything is going to go on IT. All patient records are going to go electronically submitted. And I was like, this is great. Right? This means that we have patient records codified. It's probably easy to perform data analytics on these records. And maybe we could even improve the way we can treat patients. So it's all good. So I looked at him and I smiled. And he said, it's not all good because I might leave the hospital. And so will many of my older colleagues. And I said, why? He said, we're just not used to this new practice and things are changing too quickly without informing us or training us beforehand. So this then struck me. As a member of New Generation, I care a lot about efficiency, I care a lot about data. 90% of our data in the world has been collected in the past 2 years. But we need to make sure that whatever change we propose, we are always conscious of the older generation and make sure that their preferences are accommodated in order to ensure that the country can grow sustainably. So that's my view on New Generation. My second point then is I'm a member of New Politicians. And I think a lot has already been said tonight, so I don't want to repeat too many things. But I want to be part of a set of new politicians that set new standards for Thai politics. Right? When I talk about new standards for Thai politics, I talk about 3 things. Number one is, ever since I grew up in Thailand, it's almost like you're either one color or the other. The divide between the two sides has been so intense that sometimes I feel like, am I wrong that I sometimes agree with one side on certain things and agree with other side on certain things? Right? The divide has been very adversarial, and I want to make sure that we go beyond that gang politics. If there are issues that different parties agree with, and I can respond to Kun Thanathorn's 4 points later as well, but if there are issues that parties can agree with, what's the point of debating and being adversarial and opposing it just for opposition's sake? Right? We need to go beyond that adversarial politics. Number 2 is we need to make sure that we accept differences in opinion. Just because we have different political opinions, just because we are very intense about the ideology that we want to push forward for the country, doesn't mean that we have to attack each other on a personal basis. Right? I grew up watching every Wednesday Prime Minister's Questions in the UK. You basically see the Prime Minister and the leader opposition literally go all gung-ho on each other, but oftentimes by the end of it, they kind of shake hands, hug each other, and laugh their way off together. That's the kind of standard of politics that I want to see. You need to be very intense in your beliefs, because that's essentially why you're in politics, because you're presenting a solution that you think is best for the country. But at the end of the day, that cannot extend to the personal, right? And finally, and I think this actually resonates more than just standards for politics, but standards for meritocratic Thailand in general, which is what you know should be more important than who you are. If you look around this panel, I mean, one unfortunate thing is that we're all men, which I
Sorry about that.
But the other thing that we have in common is that we have all had parents or older relatives who are involved in politics, right? And that can both be an opportunity in the sense that it makes you have a better chance of learning what life in politics is like, but it's also a bit of a hindrance. And I know, like, I'm not alone in saying that when people look at me, sometimes they think that I must have exactly the same view as one of my relative who has been in Thai politics that looks a lot like me, unfortunately. I cannot change how I look, just like I cannot change who I am, which family I am born into. So I want to make sure that from now on I pledge to never use anyone's surnames or any factors that one cannot control, whether it's gender, your social status, etc., as a base for political arguments. Right? I know that even Kun Thanatorn has been both attacked and praised, given that his relative has been involved in politics. I will never use that at any point in this new standard of politics that I want to set. And finally, and probably most importantly, I am here as a member of the New Democrat, right? Capital N, capital D. People assume that my decision to work with the Democrat Party is automatic and inevitable, right? But it is far from the truth. The two main reasons why people think that it's inevitable that I will join the Democrats, number one is because I have a relative in there. But actually, as many of you in the FCCT I'm sure would know, I have two relatives, one of which worked at the Democrat Party and the other which was a leading member of the Thai Party. So if you're going to use it from the relative front, then actually I have two potential parties I can choose. The second reason that people associate... The second reason that people think that I'm associated with the Democrats is because I used to intern there when I was 16. Now, the reason that I actually interned there was because the Democrat Party at the time was the only political party that actually offered an internship program. So as a student who was keen to know what politics was all about before I chose my A-level subjects, I joined the Democrat Party internship program. And actually, believe it or not, if I open my Facebook account now, the 2 or 3 usual suspects who would go about criticizing the Democrats are actually my friends from that internship program. So the internship program was never meant as a way for you to come in and get brainwashed and join the Democrat Party. It was just simply a learning ground for you to understand what life in politics was like. So my decision to join the Democrats has not been automatic, especially over the last few years. In the fight against issues like corruption, I have always been a small d Democrat, in the sense that I have always believed in democracy. I have never believed that the solution is to ever have the military take over. But the past 5 or 10 years, over the past 5 years, I wasn't sure if I was the big D Democrat. Right? Many of the actions that were taken by the old Democrat Party can often be construed and can often raise questions whether the big D Democrat Party actually are small d Democrats. Are they actually supportive of the principle of democracy upon which they were founded? This is why, if you asked me 2 months ago to say that, am I a representative of the Democrat Party, I will probably not accept that invitation. The reason I am able to accept now, and I am willing to accept future invitations as part of the New Democrat Party, is because I want to change the Democrat Party. Right? I want to bring the Democrat Party back to the principles upon which they were founded. And there are three areas upon which I want to change and help reform the Democrat Party. Number one is on ideology. the New Democrat is going to stand for what I believe is the third way, or the principles of liberal democracy. I don't believe that over the past 10 to 15 years, Thailand has ever reached the status of liberal democracy. This is because of two misnomers, or two beliefs that I disagree with. Belief number one is the belief that, let's talk about this. Why do we think democracy is so valuable? We always say like democracy is a good thing, but why is it really that we think democracy is valuable, right? One argument is to say that democracy is valuable because of the outcome it creates. Because if you let 100 people vote on what they want, then you're going to get, if you respect the majority rule, you're going to get what society wants. Now that is a very dangerous view of why democracy is valuable. Because if you believe that democracy is valuable because of the outcome it generates, it can lead you down a path where you think that sometimes you or a certain group of people actually know more than the people. And that will lead you to believe that some people's opinions are more valuable than others and lead you to military coup, which is number one harm to liberal democracy. The second harm to liberal democracy is the belief that democracy is all about elections and respecting majority rule. This is the belief that democracy is valuable because of the process. But let me pose you this example, right? If there was a country with 100 people in the country, 60 people support religion A, 40 people support religion B. If there was an election and the 60 people decide to get together and vote to say, we are not going to let people who believe in religion B have the right to work, have the right to vote, have the right to even live in the country. Is it democratic by process? You could say it is, because there are elections and we respect the majority rule. But is it really going to create a democratic society? Now, I don't think that's the answer. Democracy is valuable because it espouses two intrinsic values. One is equality, which is the belief that everyone has an equal right to say how the country should be dictated, and everyone is equally enforced by the same law. And the values of liberty, which is everyone in democracy has the freedom to live in laws that they have played a part in making. And this is why I believe that Thailand has never reached liberal democracy, and is what is the agenda that I'm pushing forward to the New Democrat and pushing forward to the country. Liberal democracy demands more than just free and fair elections. It demands more than just respecting majority rule, but it also demands protection of human rights. It demands decentralization of power to make sure that power is not concentrated in the few. It demands a strong system of checks and balances, whether by independent organizations or the justice system that are not interfered by elected politicians. So that's number one. The New Democrat will stand for liberal democracy. Right? Number two is the Democrat Party also needs to change the way it manages itself. In my view, a good democratic political party should do two things, or should have two aspects. Number one is, if you're going to compete, if you're going to say or claim that you want to manage the country in a democratic way, the party itself should also be internally democratic. Right? I think this has actually been a strength of the Democrats, right? One of the few strengths of the Democrats, which is that it's always been internally democratic. It's very hard to pinpoint who the main donor of the Democrat Party is. We talk a lot about crowdfunding these days, but the Democrat has always crowdfunded in an analog way, from membership fees, etc. They also have the highest number of members by far. We have 2.5 million members, up until General Prayut decided to set zero and everything. And we have the highest number of branches. So this is a strength that the Democrat has always had. But the weakness, in my view, is that the Democrats have often been called NATO, which is no action, talk only. Right? And I think it's now important to make sure that the Democrat is both internally democratic, but also has the power to make quick, effective decisions, given the fast changing world that we have today. Which is why one of the things that's been announced 2 or 3 days ago, which I think has not been played enough in the media, which I think is very important to make sure that the party is both internally democratic and effective at decision making, is that the Democrat Party, the New Democrat Party, is now allowing its members to actually directly vote for its leader. What this means is that, number one, it increases the internal democracy of the party because each member has a bigger say in where the party goes, but it also enables the leader of the party to take more decisive action because it actually has the mandate of its members. I think this is a good starting point to show how the New Democrat is going to be both democratic and effective in decision making. And then finally, and thirdly, the New Democrats have to put policy at the top of its agenda. Whether we believe it's fairly or unfairly criticized, the Democrats have often been criticized of Watakam in Thai, which is kind of, how do you translate it in? Yeah, like discourse instead of, actually style, not substance. That's how about. So policy is what should drive politicians. And policy is what we are presenting to the country that's actually going to impact people's lives. So the new Democrat needs to put policy at the top of its agenda, both in terms of the process of making policy, as well as the content of the policy itself. In terms of the process, we need to make sure that policies are not drafted by just politicians. I don't believe that if the world was full of politicians, I think it'd be a very, very dangerous world. We need to make sure that we pull in experts from different fields, academics from different fields, local leaders, to make sure that the policy that we create actually involves as many people as possible, so that it reflects the interests of as many people as possible. And in terms of the content, the world has changed a lot. Right? If you look at the center of gravity, it's just shifted towards Asia. The society is aging. There's technology that's disrupting literally every industry. So the policy also needs to be innovative. And I don't want to go into too much detail about the policies that the new Democrat is exploring, but I'll talk about two areas, right? One is the economy. The economic structure has changed a lot. We hear the government talk a lot about how there's good news about the economy growing at 3 or 4%, and yet on the other hand, you see that people in the local communities do not feel that their living standards are actually better at all, right? There's something wrong with that, right? You can have 4% GDP and the poorer people in the country don't feel that things are improving, something is wrong. I think the first step is that in a new economic structure where inequality is increasing, we need to change the way we measure economic performance. GDP is a very odd measure, right? Because it basically adds up our income and expenses in the country. Let me put it to you this way. If I'm stuck in traffic for 2 hours, GDP goes up, right? If I have to go buy a mask to protect myself from pollution, GDP goes up. If I have more time to actually look after my children, which I don't have at the moment, GDP actually doesn't go up. If 1,000 people get together to volunteer to do community service without getting paid, GDP doesn't go up. There is something wrong there. GDP no longer reflects the world that we live in, where living standards are defined by more than just income, but also non-market benefits like leisure, as well as impact to environment and inequality. We need to look for a different measure to make sure that wherever the government is directing the economy towards, if that metric improves, then the people's lives actually improve. That's the start. The second thing is technology is disrupting work everywhere. No job in the world now is safe from technological disruption. We used to think that that machines would only replace humans at manufacturing jobs, but even now you have artificial intelligence that can make trailers, movie trailers, a job that I would never have thought could be performed by anyone but human. So job uncertainty and risk to unemployment is now increased. Inequality is now increased. We need to look for measures that help guarantee people in terms of basic universal income. Right? That is also an idea that we want to move towards, which is universal basic income. I know I need to wrap up because I'm getting looks from Jonathan. But education, I just want to talk about education finally because that's been talked about. Education is a problem in Thailand. We all know that, right? And I believe that education is the most important thing because if you think about the objective of the economy, it is how do you grow the size of the pie as big as possible, and how do you divide it fairly? Some policies help grow the size of the pie, but does not help divide it fairly, and vice versa. Education, I believe, is the only thing, or one of the only few policy areas that actually help both grow the economy and also create equality of opportunity that helps divide the cake more fairly. Technology has made new things in education possible. Number one, it has made, it enables us to move away from using lessons and teachers' time to memorize, to actually learn about new skills, right? If I want to know what happened in the Second World War, I can just go up on Google. I don't need a teacher lecturing me for an hour. But if I want to discuss and critically think about why the Second World War happened, I need teachers' help, right? Technology enables students to actually find information elsewhere and use up teachers' time to actually improve critical thinking and soft skills, which are important for getting a job later. Technology also enables us to reduce inequality in education. There's actually a case study that I looked at called Bridge Academies in Africa. And the way they've done it is actually they gave each teacher in a rural school a tablet, and from the central HQ then actually monitor how the teacher scrolls through the iPad to make sure that they actually pace their lessons correctly and follow the curriculum rightly. That's one way of that's one way of enabling them to actually monitor teachers' performance, right? And then finally, education is also made possible by technology in terms of, so the nirvana of education is personalized education. How do you make sure that the content that you're teaching each student is tailored to what they actually need, right? Technology has made that possible by collecting data, allowing it to analyze and actually come up with a set of interventions and a set of homework that's actually tailored to the student's strengths and weaknesses. These are all innovative things that Thailand has never seen before, and this is what the New Democrats needs to push for. It's not enough just to change its ideology and come back to the principle of liberal democracy, because at the end of the day, it needs to improve the living standards of the people in the country, and that the only way to do that is through new innovative policies. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I wasn't actually looking at you to hurry you up. I was looking at you thinking if that was an unprepared speech, I can't imagine what a prepared one would have been like. I can't remember a time where we had such an extraordinary, fluent and varied set of thoughts from 4 speakers, and we've been very privileged to hear them. We are throwing the floor open to questions. This is a journalist club. Now, we don't normally enforce this rule, but I am going to prioritize working journalists. Please, if you ask your questions first before I throw the floor open to other people. And just to remind you to identify yourselves, 1 question only, please, and please keep it short, no statements. Peter.
Peter Johnson, The Banker magazine. Number 1, let me compliment the panel for at least most of you emphasizing education as a priority for Thailand. I would support that 100%. You know, as a reporter who tends to look at economic issues and where the Thai economy is going, one thing I can say about the current regime is that it has been very pro-FDI, foreign direct investment. They've gone out of their way to make Thailand's ranking and the ease of doing business better. They're pushing infrastructure. They're pushing EEC. They have a lot of programs that seem targeting foreign direct investment. I'm just interested in your policy directives. You know, what's your attitude in general towards FDI and you know, there's a tendency of governments in Thailand to undo what the previous government did, right? I mean, well, there's a tendency in all governments. You look at Trump and Obama, right, to undo whatever the previous government did. Is there a general consensus that this emphasis on FDI by this regime has been the wrong concentration? Yeah? Thank you.
Looks like you want to start, yeah.
Sure. I can talk about the EEC, because this is a very interesting topic. I think the intention to grow the Eastern Economic Corridor is a good intention, right? Too much of GDP in Thailand is concentrated in Bangkok. This is not sustainable. So it's good that the government has identified certain areas of growth outside Bangkok into which it can grow. Attracting FDI is in and of itself not necessarily a bad thing. Building infrastructure in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing. But I think the 2 questions we always need to ask whenever we try to give tax breaks to foreign investors and build all these mega projects that are costing taxpayers millions and millions of money is, number 1, does it really benefit the local community? Is it really the best use of money to be spending it on infrastructure projects, whether it's high-speed rail or new ports? Is there actually demand for it? Right? Number 2 then is, once you have foreigners who already invest, who invest into Thailand because of these new attractive incentives like tax breaks and 99-year-long land leases, the question is, how do you actually get that technology that they invest into actually transfer into Thailand? You look at the R&D level in Thailand, I think it's about 0.6% of GDP. You look at other countries, even in ASEAN, it's around 2 to 3%. There's a deficit of R&D spending in Thailand, and that is a problem. So how do we make sure that we tie these foreign investors to also transfer the technology to local companies and local Thai businesses as well? I think those are the two questions we always need to ask when we think about FDI.
Do any of the rest of the panel have any thoughts on FDI and the Thai obsession with foreign direct investment? Indeed, one could argue it's been a very successful drawer of foreign direct investment in the past, but all this talk of needing to transform the economy into a knowledge-based one, perhaps there's been too much obsession in it.
I think with the FDI, the question about it is that what do we get and what do they get? It has always, for example, the high-speed trains, of course, what comes with the railways are the real estate that's surrounding it. The main question is, who gets to do what? Who get which piece of the pie? What do the Thai people get? Is it just a bunch of money being dumped into our country and build a railway, and do they get a free flow of real estate pieces around the country? I think it's not just a matter of what do we, what do they get? The transfer, like what my colleague said here, is that what do the people of Thailand really benefit? It's not just we get the railway. It's not just we get some other technology. Of course, Thailand is doing the EEC as part of the one world, one belt that China is trying to build at the moment. But the amount of technology and investment that's being flown into Thailand, sometimes one need to raise the question, how much Thai people really get the benefit from it? We're talking about a high-speed train, for example, the clearest one. Will Thai people be really using it? The amount of money being invested, the cost of the tickets to go from A to B, does it really justify not using the local, the current means of transport that we have, the bus? And what else do we get apart from the high-speed train? I think the question we need to ask ourselves is just what else does really Thai people, really benefit from? Is it just the train? What else do we get? Does it justify what we have to give? And I think FDI is always good, but we have to make sure that it's got the right balance between that, what really benefit the people of the country and the company that's investing in our country. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Kun Pom.
Yes, the question about FDI, I believe that the benefits we get from the FDI, at least from the technology transfer, the hiring, the money from foreign abroad, coming in to hire our people to create more income for the people in the country. But the question, the main issue is that this policy about FDI, I believe that the military government here, they try to draw as much FDI as much as they can into the economic to stimulate economic growth. But what I've seen is actually the money is not really distributed to the people all around the country. So what I think myself, I believe that we should actually focus on the domestic consumption. It's more like to create more, people purchasing power, the multiplier effect. Right now what they're trying to do, they're trying to inject money into the grassroots economy. But I'm from Khon Kaen. Many of you may have been there or may not been there. It's a province in the northeastern of Thailand. A lot of poor people. And with the, I would say the populist policy or project of this government, been saying that they're trying to look after the people in rural area. But what happened? If under the normal condition of democracy, you see that a lot of corruption has been going around. So I believe that I think the military government is going to the wrong way. Not really. The best thing for them to do, I believe that they should return democracy to the country and let the people who should be elected to run the country for the benefit of the people of this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Konek.
I will share the same view with the previous speaker, that the process of having this Eastern Economic Corridor is undemocratic. So first we have to set this straight. There are many other ways to promote the local economy. I would propose that instead of promote certain sector in the market, particularly, we build infrastructure, efficient infrastructure, and let the private sector decide which industry they want to invest. But before all that, we have to come back to one very big issue here in Thailand. If you want to reform education, tomorrow you got a coup d'etat. If you want to upgrade your OTOP, tomorrow you get a coup d'etat. If you want to change the current the current Democrat Party, tomorrow you may get an internal coup d'etat. Seriously, I mean it. Seriously, I mean it. If you invent or innovate a policy that touch the interest, power or economic of the establishment, you got coup d'etat as a return. So for us, I think no one refuse. No, I think everyone understands the idea of better education. Everyone understands the idea of better infrastructure. Everyone understands the idea of innovative economy. And I'm telling you, I see lots and lots and lots of people who are very inventive, who are very innovative, but they just cannot use their full potential to the best benefit of our country. And that is the sole reason that there is a ceiling of what you can do in this country. For education, for example, we all know that there are lots of international curriculums out there. I think somebody already mentioned that if you are rich enough, you would prefer to send your children to international schools. And the basis of that is international school don't use Thai curriculum. So let this be free, for example. Tangible, something very tangible about education. Let state schools choose their curriculum. If they like the Thai state curriculum, fine. If they like the IB curriculum, fine. If they like the GCSE curriculum, fine. They can choose the curriculum they want to educate the children in their schools. Very tangible, fine. The problem is if you propose this, you got a coup d'etat. It's something very simple. So for us, of course, we do see the importance of the new economy, the innovation. But we have to come back to this, that you have to unlock this first. This is the floor, this is the minimum. I do care about the people's well-being, I do care about the poor, I do care about the farmers. And then what they want is their right to decide their own future. That is what they need the most. And you have to give them this. Unless and until you give them this, no one will be freed. No one will be able to pursue their own dreams. Pursuing your own dreams should be a fundamental right, but you cannot in this society. So our party in the next election, of course, we want to planting this idea about human rights, about democratic values, is a mission and is equally important to gaining parliamentary seats. For us, we have two missions in the next election: planting these values, protect these values, and gaining parliamentary seats. And that's why, I mean, I can go on and on with this, the innovation in the society. For example, another thing we've been thinking of lately is we're talking about a lot about corruption. Our idea to solve that is something very tangible, doable. We want to use the big data to solve the problem. How? I give you one example. Anyone who doesn't own anyone who don't own a car in Bangkok and have to use the public buses know the pain of how efficient Bangkok buses are. Well, it's not at all, right? So, open the GPS data of all the buses running in Bangkok to the public and let the private sector handle the information. Let them think of how to handle this, GPS data from the running buses. What you get? You can solve the problem of the bus efficiency, and at the same time you can build a new economy, right? Let them access to this information, and let them come up with another application, and let them compete with each other using this GPS data, government data, but turn it into public. So one shot, two birds. You can solve the problem and you can build a new economy. Plain, simple, doable, but it cannot be done under the current structure of the government because the bus is with one ministry and the GPS data belongs to another ministry, and you cannot just give away that GPS data.
The BMA will probably blow a fuse at that. But
Yeah, sorry, I was going to say I must have missed something because the question was about FDI.
Yeah.
So if you want me to comment about democracy and corruption, I'm happy to talk about that.
I'm not talking about the democracy. I'm talking about the very fundamental problem in this country, FDI or otherwise. You have to touch this issue if you want to push this country forward.
By the way, you're not obliged, all of you, to answer a question if you don't particularly have a point of view on it, but please do if you want to. Next question, please.
Thank you. I'm Isra, economist from Matichon Weekly. I have only one question. I think there are only Thanatorn's declared series of radical change agenda against undemocratic regimes to reshape Thai political landscape. What about other three positions? Thank you.
Is that positions on democratizing the political landscape?
Yeah.
You felt you didn't hear it from the other three speakers?
Yeah, I want to hear that.
Okay, so I mean, Thanatorn, I'll probably take a break from this one, has been very passionate about democracy, or at least, I think you went further than that. It was really getting rid of the sort of authoritarian habits in Thailand and getting the military out was fundamental, and nothing else could really work without that. Clearly the questioner feels he didn't get enough from the other three of you about that being the essence of everything. Sorry.
So you're asking about my views about the undemocratic process in Thailand, right? What is the question?
Kun Thanatorn says that they have an idea to take out junta or traditional establishments out from the country. And what about you trees?
So, okay, yep. So, revolutionary call to arms from our colleague here. How revolutionary are the remaining three of you?
Right. I would start off saying that myself, I've been in politics for 11 years. I was elected as the youngest member of parliament in 2007. And I didn't expect to have, two consecutive, my dad was one. My dad was actually deputy minister in Kun Thaksin's administration, and also in Kun Jinglak administration as well. So I've been through two coup d'etat in the last, from 10 years. So I would say that it's very sad for the country. This country needs to restore democracy, because democracy is a good ground for everything, especially the development of the economy. But what we've been through, there's a big political revolution in Thailand back in 1932, changing the governing system from absolute monarchy to constitutional monarchy. But most of the time, the country is run by military, ruled by military. 18 attempts of coup d'etat with 13 success. We have the most constitution, 20, with the current one was the 2017. So what we think about this issue, I don't support any illegal action which taken away the right of the people through, they exercising their power through the election. I would say that we have to do everything to try to prevent this to happen.
But if you're elected under the next election, you will be working as an MP underneath a semi-military system. They will still have a lot of control.
We still, I know that there are traps in this constitution, a lot of traps in this constitution. But we still have to work and try to go for the election, because that's the way that your supporter can have the hope of your party to be, performing for themselves. I would say that I'm not sure right now, because how much we can do about trying to get this military junta into trial. I have heard about, Kun Thanatorn saying about the ICC as part of the prevention, but I believe that the most important thing is you have to get the people mindset. We have to change the mindset of the people.
And I think it's fair to say that Thai people have, whether reluctantly or not, have more or less gone along with this military government. I mean, Kun Top, your party is famous for getting along and doing deals with anybody, and I sensed in what you were saying about, for example, an appointed prime minister, that you're a little equivocal. It doesn't sound like you want to put yourself forward as a revolutionary.
Now let me correct a little misstatement there. In the past, well, my view and my father's view is might be different, but in the past, when we saw Chart Thai Party and my father, 1 minute, in one government, we coalition with the Democrats, and we also the next time we coalition with the Pheu Thai or the Thai Rak Thai Party, and then we were accused of being, sliding and slitting and joining everyone. I think the main question becomes that if we are being seen as, so slimy, why does Kun Chuan and the former Prime Minister Pisit called my father the first person to join the coalition? If we are seen as the untrustable, if we are seen as sliding everywhere, why Kun Thaksin called us as a first person? My father, he actually stayed in Chart Thai Party from the day it was, since he was the Secretary General until the day the Chart Thai Party was dissolved in 2008 as the verdict of the Constitution Court. During the time when the Democrat was the leader of the coalition, Kun Apisit was, sorry, I have to mention his name, was a prime minister then. Okay. There were incidents that the public was begging for the Chart Thai Party to leave the coalition. But then we said, we joined the ship. We will sing with the ship. And then later, when Pheu Thai Party under Kun Thaksin, or even at that time Kun Somchai's administration, we also joined the coalition. There came a time when the public was calling for us to leave the coalition because there was so much corruption, blah, 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 so on and so forth. And we refused because we said we joined the ship, we will sink with the ship, and we actually died with that ship as a result of that. We actually drowned with that ship, and we were frozen for 5 years. So now, talking about democracy from now on, my view is that we are not looking to become the coalition, but we are looking for our policy, the way for our policy to be implemented. Should we join the government and our policy cannot be implemented or be integrated into the policy of the new government, then what good is it for us to join the government? What about the promises we made to the people that we will do A, B, and C when we go into the government and A, B, and C was deducted or was cut from our policy? So our point forward is that our concentration, our main focus is not joining the government, but how to best implement our policy and how to deliver the promises that we made to the people. Now go back to the question about democracy. As a politician, no one can agree with the coup d'etat, no matter how many times it happens. But going forward, how are we going to prevent it from happening? Like I mentioned during what I said at the beginning, that the classic reason the military used to come up with the coup d'etat was that there was so much mayhem in the political arena. There was so much corruption. There was so much disruption within the political arenas. That's why they have to step in. So in order to prevent that, We have to make sure that we get our house in order first. And I believe to go forward, it's not just the new generations that's going to lead this country forward. I think it's a new generation together with the synergetic coalition with the previous generation. We cannot just leave them behind. We need their knowledge, we need their experiences combined with the fresh ideas of the new faces of the new era of the politicians.
So not a revolutionary, I'm proud of it.
No, I'm not a revolution. I don't believe in a radical change. I believe in a gradual change. And eventually, we will have all the new faces in politics. But until then, at this point in time, we need the old and the new and mix them together for us to go forward.
Thanatorn.
I think it's very unfair, Jonathan. I mean, after hearing Kuntop's speech, to say that Chathai Patana is sliding and doesn't have a clear ideology. For me, it's very obvious that they have a very clear ideology, which is they will be in government, regardless. But let me come back to the question of democracy, and I'll answer three things, right? The first one is, I thought I was quite clear about what my vision for democracy was. I support a system called liberal democracy, which I believe is a system that even without the military coup, Thailand has never reached in the past 10 or 15 years, right? It is a system that, of course, opposes any undemocratic measures. Free and fair elections is a necessary but not sufficient component of liberal democracy. But having free and fair elections and respecting the wishes of the majority is not enough, right? There are I see it as four legs of democracy. One is free and fair elections and supporting and respecting the wishes of the majority. Number two is decentralization of power. Let me put that into something more tangible and that you can touch with, right? Centralizing power is very dangerous and very prone to risks of corruption, right? I want to see Thailand decentralize power away from the national government towards the local government. Each province, I believe, should be able to elect its own mayor, right? Two reasons. One is, instead of having someone from the central government who potentially live in Bangkok being appointed to each province, I would like to see provinces like Khon Kaen, Suphanburi actually be able to elect someone from their own province that knows the problems of that province inside out to actually manage the province itself. Number two is, having them elected is not enough. You also need to empower them. How can we make sure that the mayor of Khon Kaen and the mayor of Suphanburi actually has the power to actually obtain loans to actually build new schools, build new hospitals, develop public transport system? I actually went to Khon Kaen, I think 2 weeks ago. I was so impressed by the Khon Kaen development team that has managed to propose the new train. And I feel that we need to empower these provinces to actually manage the province in the way that they would like to see it. So, free and fair elections, decentralization. Number three is checks and balances, right? How do we make sure that that organizations like the courts, like the Electoral Commission, are not interfered with by political parties? Because otherwise you end up having elected politicians controlling every aspect of the country, and that's actually very, 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 very dangerous. Right?
And that's probably the toughest question
John,
to answer.
may I just add a teeny weeny little thing in defense of my late father, was that
I think it was said in all respect.
of course,
you're very clear about your objections.
When one starts with all due respect, you're about to unrespect someone. That's the classic political thing. But this is a reason why I specifically said to go forward, we need the new generations as well as the old generation. We need the ideas of the new and the experiences and the mistakes of the previous generations. I mean, if my dear handsome colleague here, Kun Prarit, go back in time and talk with Kun Chuan or Kun Napisit, after my father was kind of grilled on the podium for the entire week about his nationality, and eventually it was proven that it was a groundless accusation. And then 6 months later, when the Democrat was actually trying to form the coalition, we actually didn't want to form the coalition because after all, they were grilling my father about my grandfather for about 7 days. It went to the point that my dad actually asked my mom, actually, was I born in Thailand? You know, he was paranoid about it. But then, anyway, back to the situation that 6 months later, the Democrat actually have to come and literally beg my father to please join the government. everyone in Supandri, everyone, including myself, told my father that, please, Dad, do not join them, because they just grilled my grandfather for 7 days. They said, you know, you like a refugee, go onto the boat into Thailand. But then if my dad did not join the government at that time, there would be no government. And hence, you know, he decided to join the government against all his decisions, against all the advice. So just to point out that we really did not only look to become the coalition, we were kind of really begged to be the coalition party.
I apologize if I didn't. It was a joke. I did not mean to offend anyone. I obviously denounce any actions by previous politicians, regardless of which party, that attack people on personal basis.
That's okay. I would just like to clarify.
Let me just clarify my question on democracy. Right, the question was on democracy.
It was indeed, yeah.
So free and fair elections, decentralization, checks and balances, and then finally freedom of expression, which also means free press. Right.
Sorry,
media.
Kunpom, you wanted to say something quickly?
Yes, please. I just didn't
Keep it brief, because I want to get some more questions in here.
Okay. Just to answer to the news reported from Nathithorn, our party standpoint is quite clear. We don't support any kind of dictatorship. And that's derived from the 3 core principles of our party, which are to uphold the democracy. Second one is we oppose any dictatorship. And the third one is we value the people at the center of everything. Yeah. So is that's help?
Clear. I would say that you've all been very clear, but nobody yet has actually come up with a way in which you can stop the military from intervening, which it clearly feels it has the right to do when necessary. Michael.
Thank you. At last.
Sorry. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I haven't finished my answer.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, Jonathan.
I've now lost
track
of.
This is not.
I've lost track of which answer you interrupted.
I'm sorry, that was unacceptable. I've been asked to start. I don't care who you are.
Sorry, Michael. Let's can we let him ask his question, please? Yeah.
Do you want him to answer?
No, go ahead. You've been invited to answer.
Michael Mackey, freelance journalist, owner of a heart that's going at 140, because I want to bring up the issue of serious political reform. Kuntanarat, what I was going to ask you is, are you not guilty of maybe fracturing the reformist wing in the Thai electorate by setting up your own party? Would you not have been better throwing your lot in with Per Thai and helping get a reformist government elected? And I also wanted to ask, are there any specific political reforms that you will be putting forward that you think can actually start the process of reforming the Thai state? Thanks.
So that one's straight to you, Thanatorn Kunik. Why? It's a classic question to any newer, smaller party. Your beliefs appear to become quite close to Per Thai's. Why split the vote?
Why split the vote? We are no nominee to Per Thai party. I voted for Per Thai before in the last election. Actually, I was with them. I was when I got a free time. I always joined the red shirt protest back then. The idea of forming a new party for me is very simple. Per Thai no longer represent my ideology. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's very simple. Thanks very much. Marwan.
Yeah, Marwan Mark of the Nikkei Asian Review. My question is also to Kun Thanatorn. You know, you represent Thailand's 1%. You're a billionaire, a tycoon, and what has not been addressed here is the big players in Thai economy and how they underwrite mobs in this country. If you look at Pracharat, which the current government, the junta, is propagating as a solution and as a response to, say, the poor Thai policies, and if you look at the members on that board, they are all the captains of Sino-Thai families and the ones who actually are profiting from the coup. You rub shoulders with these people in your social circles as a member of the 1%. Are they ready for your kind of aspirational party? I mean, are they ready for the kind of ideas you're trying to advocate? or would they prefer the existing system where they can have military governments or proxy political parties and profit from the background? Thanks.
Would you, if you are the exploited, would you prefer to maintain the status quo? No. The answer for me, I refuse to believe that people are stupid. I refuse to believe that people cannot think for themselves. I refuse to believe that people cannot dream of the better society by themselves and for themselves. So I think the question somehow, I'm not sure if I can answer it this way, but let me give you an example. Why I do believe in that the people is ready. I give you an example. I don't know if how many of you know the BNK, you know, you know the BNK. So the BNK last week, there were about almost 100 million YouTube viewers, and this BNK is very famous with the people living in urban areas. If you look at the Thai folk music, Thai folk songs, these songs are easily reached 200 million, 300 million YouTube viewers, easily, and no one in Bangkok would know about it. So it's very simple that the utilization of technology, the use of technology has reached millions of people in Thailand. If you look at the internet penetration, it's 1-to-1 already, maybe even more than 1-to-1 in Thailand. So they consume the news the way Bangkok people consume the news. They utilize the technology the way Bangkok people utilize the technology. So I think they are ready for change. In fact, they are eager for change. I don't really know how to answer this question except let the election say it. Let the people say for themselves.
Actually, what I was meant was the rich people of Thailand. Are they ready to accept your ideas? I think you have attracted.
Okay. So not the people, the rich.
Yeah,
you mean?
because that's your people.
Apologize.
I mean, you're the one who hangs out with the one person.
Yeah.
Are they ready for you?
You're from a wealthy family yourself.
Yeah.
What does your family say?
I come from the 1%, but I'm standing for the 99. So you would be surprised how much the 1% are willing to listen to me. The same thing the Red Church has been saying, the same thing Thaksin has been saying. And just one reason, and one reason only, I am not Thaksin. And they listen to me. And the content is almost the same, you know.
Yes, Thanatorn. I was thinking about the point you're making about the domination of the big families. Somebody actually once said to me, you know, it's not the army, it's not the parties, it's these big businesses. They own and control the whole country. It's an oligarchy. Item.
Sorry, firstly, I would like to apologize to the gentleman sitting over there. I did not mean to interrupt your question, and I wholeheartedly apologize for doing that. But I would also like to respect the question of the gentleman from Matichon and actually just answer his question and complete my answer.
Sure.
Right? I've already talked about what my view of democracy was. I'm sure what he was looking for was also certain pledges related to what Thanatorn was saying about where the Democrats lie in this whole question, right? And let me be very clear. Free and fair elections, respecting the wishes of the people, is one fundamental leg of a democracy in the future. And if I were ever given the honor and the privilege to be in the House of Parliament, I will not put my hand up for an outsider PM. Because although I understand the Constitution states that to have an outsider PM, you need 500 out of 750 votes in both houses, which basically means that even if all the unelected senators vote for an outsider PM, you still need a majority of the lower elected house. I still believe that it is deceptive to the electorate to propose a prime minister, the identity of which no one knew when they cast their voting ballots. So I will pledge right now that I will not put my hand up for an outsider PM, and I will fight my hardest to make sure that the Democrats also do not do that.
Thank you very much. Kun Top, yeah, sorry.
May I, well, what I'm about to say now is not going to be in defense for Kun Thanatorn, but it's related to the question about him setting up a political party. I think it's the wonderful thing of politics and democracy where everyone have the rights to stay on the ground on their own thought. Kun Thanatorn believe that currently no political parties that he sees here, not Pheu Thai, not the Democrat, not Chat Thai Patana Party, or any political party could represent his thought. And I wholeheartedly support him setting up his own political party if the new generations would like to support him, or if anyone would like to agree with him. I support that, despite the fact that we may agree or not agree on certain topics. But for him to be able to present something for a new generation, to be able to step forward and set up a new political party in this point in time, I really commend him for that, and that's why I really hope to see all of us back into Parliament together. But I believe that it's the right thing to do, and it's a honourable thing to do. Not in defence of him, of course.
Thank you very much. Can I get the next question, please? Todd.
Hi, I'm Todd Reese. I'm the editor of House on English, and part of that means my reality is nagging reporters all day to try to get a hold of answers from guys who, well, some women, but mostly guys like you. And in the context of this venue, what I want to ask is a very practical question, which is, I'd like to hear a commitment from each of you in regards to, you guys say a lot of you say you want to turn the page on things, the commitment you're going to make to transparency, accessibility. The media has been under a lot of assault and demonization for a long time. And I admit, I'm kind of like you noted, a lot of the attention tonight is on Kun Thanatorn. I'm kind of prompted to ask this because I was a little disappointed yesterday. I had a reporter who was trying all day to get a hold of Kun Thanatorn, and his response was that he wouldn't answer questions by phone, but only written questions, which we don't do. So I really would like to hear from each of you what kind of commitment you make to a free and open press and your hopes to being accessible to the media. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, you won't answer questions by phone. But at any rate, the question is commitment to a free press and commitment to respond to the press as well. And you're in a press club, so
Yeah.
we're very interested.
I think for me, the answer is very simple. We will uphold the freedom of the press, the value of the freedom of the press, like Kun Prit already mentioned, is a very fundamental pillar of a strong economy. The question about accessing me, I have to apologize. I have to apologize on that. I got so many calls these days. Only supporters, I got like, I don't know, 50 to 100.
Okay, but you did reply in a message. You said, by policy, you don't take impromptu phone calls. That's what the message said specifically. So it wasn't, I don't think it got lost in the shuffle. You did reply that you would not reply because you didn't take phone calls. That's all. Just want to clarify.
Apologies on that. We'll improve. We'll improve on that.
Can I have the views of Item on media freedom, which of course is quite compromised in Thailand by both laws and culture?
Sure. As I said, right, liberal democracy, one of the four legs was freedom of expression and freedom of the media. Unfortunately, I don't have as many supporters as Kun Thanatorn, so I don't get that many random phone calls. But what I also don't have is someone who takes my phone calls. So if you call me, you can guarantee that if I'm free, I will pick up and I will answer any question, right? I am a big supporter of free speech, right? I was actually, when I was at university, I was president of the Oxford Union, which was a society that was founded in 1823 at a time when freedom of speech was very restricted. The fundamental beauty or core principle of the society was that it allowed students to actually debate against some of the world leading politicians, journalists, celebrities on any topic that they would like to do. In fact, the only condition we placed upon speakers being invited to our society was that they have to take any questions from the floor. I remember when I was president, we invited Sepp Blatter, who was a very controversial figure to say the least. His team was very reluctant. to accept the invitation because he didn't want the fiery Oxford student to fire any questions at him. But that was a principle that we stuck by, that I stuck by, is that even if he were to draw a huge crowd, even if he were to help the financial situation of our society by drawing people to become members, if he was not willing to accept being questioned, then we would not have him at our society. I fully believe in free speech, not necessarily because, well, why do I believe in freedom of speech, right? Number one is I don't believe that we're all infallible. Even if we believe that the other person that's speaking something wrong, we should still give him or her the right to speak, because we can never be 100% sure that what we think is right is indeed correct. The world used to think that the world was flat. If we didn't let any people who thought the world was round speak, we would never get to the real truth. Secondly, even if we know for sure that what the other person wants to say is wrong, we should still let him or her speak. Right now, I can fairly say that I'm pretty certain that the world is round. But by actually letting that person, if let's say there was one person in this room who still believed that the world was flat, instead of me saying you're not allowed to speak because the truth is the world is round, I should let him speak, let him reason, and then give him a reason to show why the world is round. I might say, why don't you go onto the sea, look towards the ocean, towards the horizon, and if the ship comes towards you, if the world was actually as flat as you said it was, you would see the ship come like that instead of emerging from underneath, right? That's the beauty of free speech. Whether you believe that what the other person is saying is right or wrong, you should let him or her speak. And then the third and final reason I support free speech and free media is because it's not just the right for that person to speak, but it's the right for everyone else in society to actually listen to different opinions. By listening to different opinions, you might pick up different bits and pieces and then form a new thought that has never been explored before. So I completely wholeheartedly agree that freedom of free press and freedom of speech is a fundamental leg of a liberal democracy.
Very nice to hear from all of you. I will say you're living under a government at the moment that argues that you can't have free speech if it's going to cause conflicts or disruption in society. And you will always face that argument.
Yep. My view, the freedom of the press is freedom of expression. So that is the basic human rights necessary for democracy. And we uphold that. And I think all of us, you have our support on that issue, because we believe that that's the right thing in the democracy and should be in the constitution as well. Thank you.
Right. Well, I personally strongly agree and totally support the freedom of the press, because since I was young, I've seen so many people reading. Well, the closest one is the senior members of my political parties and my dad. He reads like 10 newspapers a day. I never understood why until today, because the press are truly the reflection on what the public is thinking. The journalists, the columnists, their ideas, their thought. It's always good to talk. It's always good to communicate. So the press should be able to communicate what they think, what the public reflects upon them, for them to reflect it back on to the public. So for me, and for the Chathai Patana Party, we do believe strongly in free speech and especially the freedom of the press. The press should be able to express what they think is right. If it is whatever it is, if it's not, then we talk about it. There are so many occasions where politicians or people would sit down and talk with the press on what really happens. And then things get delivered to the people, get reflected. But the most important thing of all, initially, the press needs to be able to express their ideas, their thought, and reflects what the public really wants. So it's totally agreeable, and I strongly support the freedom of the press. And under the normal democratic society or the government, I'm sure every single one of us here wouldn't have any problem, expressing our thought or asking any questions. And then again, it's up to the politician or up to the individual whether to answer it, feel comfortable to respond or not.
I mean, this is a very big subject, and I don't want to get too much into it because it's so complex. Okay, fine. Let's get the next question, please.
Hello, I am a Thai voter. So, since you
can I have your name, please?
Jay.
Jay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, since you talk about freedom of speech, I would like to ask: are you prepared to take out certain laws that prevent Thai citizens to speak freely. And for Kun Thanatorn, that talks about that you believe people and Thai people have the right to think for themselves. Are you going to allow certain banned documents or books to be publicized within Thailand for Thai people to read and actually think and make their own decisions instead of being given information on a silver platter? Like you talk the talk, but I want to hear more specific of how you're going to do it.
It's a natural follow-on. Just let's be realistic here. We live under Thai law. There are things that none of us can talk freely about, and everybody knows. And there's no point. We might argue to change that. Certainly the laws, and it's not just the famous 112 law, which obviously is by any definition a restrictive law when it comes to freedom of speech. But of course Thailand has criminal defamation, the Computer Crimes Act, and of course we have Kun Jun, a lawyer who's been charged with sedition. There's a whole range of these. I mean, we've got people in this audience who've all had experience of this. You talked about freedom of speech. Fundamentally, the way the law is applied and the judiciary are probably core to that.
I do agree that there are some laws, there are some certain restrictions that doesn't make sense to the current members of the press that needs to be amended or to be corrected. But then again, at the end of the day, the most important thing is that a law are just pieces of papers and words. The most important thing is the people who actually exercises and uses those laws, how they interpret it. The problem sometimes doesn't lie in the words or the law itself. It depends, the thing happens from the people who actually uses it. For example, if you give a knife, you have a knife, you give it to a serial killer, it turns into a weapon. You give it to a surgeon, it saves people's lives. You give it to a chef, he'll come up with a beautiful dish, very delicious. So a law, it depends on the morale and the ethics of the person who actually uses it and controls it and regulates it. How he's going to use that, how he's going to use his judgment to decide what is right or what is wrong. In the past, we have seen the misinterpretation of some of the laws, seen some of the laws being used in the inappropriate way, even nowadays. So I don't think sometimes it's not just the law, it's the people who's actually using the law that needs to be changed.
Sorry, yeah. Aiton, would you change the laws?
I think what Jonathan was saying was that I think we know exactly what the question is referring to, but we don't want to talk about that tonight, right? So
Probably not, no.
Let's not talk about that.
Although
right?
I think many people think we should be able to talk about at least the law itself.
But let me talk about freedom of speech in the classroom, which was something that the gentleman touched on as well. This, I think, is a core fundamental of moving the education system from rote learning to critical thinking, right? And let me pose like a realistic example of what I want to see happen, right? Two things. One is at the moment there is a lot of perception in the classroom where if a student were to ask the teacher why, it would be seen as in Thaiก้าวร้าว หรือว่า or aggressive. Arrogant and aggressive. But I want to make sure that we help train teachers to understand and actually take these questions, because the best way for students to learn is actually to come up with their own questions and ask why. The second tangible thing that I want to change is the way the tests or assessments actually measure students' performance, right? We are too concentrated on questions of fact, such as when did this war start, what was the name of this king, what was the name of this treaty. We should be more asking questions of why. Why did the Second World War happen? Why did this event so and so happen? How could we have prevented it? What that will basically mean is that the answer to that question, there's no one correct answer. There are multiple correct answers. I think this is the first step to changing the mindset of Thai people to actually accept difference of opinion, which is that there's no one single correct answer to every question. There's always different opinions.
Thank you. Look, we're running out of time. I'll take one more question if that's okay. Sorry, yes, continue.
I'm willing to answer the question. So, if it concerns the freedom of speech, and if you mean the Article 112, let me make it clear here that at least myself, I have no intention to propose the amendment of the Article 112. However, having said that, I will propose to amend other laws that are against the freedom of the freedom of speech, namely computer laws, the cyber security law, the security law. So these are against the fundamental right of freedom of speech. Most of the time, the military, most of the times these laws give power, give the authorities to the military to access our private information. Most of the times it gives, it interpret the free, how to put it, it's supposed to be the security of the nation, but these laws restrict the freedom of speech as these speech are against the national security, which most of the time, no, not.
Thank you very much. Let's have that last question, please. Can you identify yourself?
Hi, I'm Om Chotika Satyan from Bangkok Post. This question goes out to any panelist who would like to answer. Now, we've seen a lot of problems in the past, and I've seen, we've talked a lot here about education and how it's one of the most important factors in a true democracy, a true functioning democracy. Now, past governments have, let's say, been unable to address this situation, and it's more or less due to maybe the lack of funds, or rather the mismanagement of funds. Now, what can new politicians sort of do for that? Because if the same solutions get applied, then nothing changes. So I'd like to hear some proposed new ways out for this situation in terms of funds.
When you say mismanagement of funds, you're talking about corruption?
Well, that could be one way to see it, but there are certain cases that have been proven, but who's to say that there's not only a lack of there's only a lack of funds, or there's only a mismanagement of funds? It may be a two-way thing. So it would be nice to hear, some solutions to that, if possible, at this moment.
Let me just answer that question straight on. I don't think it's to do with a lack of funds. I think if you look at the education spending that Thailand has invested in, it's actually one of the highest areas that the country has invested taxpayers' money into. If you look at research by firms like McKinsey, you will see that the main factor that drives good performance in education systems is actually not the level of funding, but the quality of teachers. And I believe that the best way to get the quality teachers can happen in three ways. One is you want to decentralize powers to local communities, local provinces, to be able to manage schools in a decentralized way. That enables school leaders to actually be able to personally interview and recruit teachers, which then improve the interaction between different levels of teachers and improve student performance. Number two is we need to leverage technology to free up teachers' time. We don't want teachers to be spending a lot of time doing administrative work or things that do not involve interactions with students. And number three is we need to change the way teachers are trained to actually teach students. And one of the areas that I want to give as an example is actually teaching English. As the world becomes more globalized and we move towards a more integrated ASEAN, speaking English is going to be one of the key areas that distinguishes you from the rest of the labor market. And I believe that Thailand at the moment is falling behind a lot of other ASEAN countries in terms of English levels. We need to change the perception that speaking English is about learning grammar, but instead increase interactions and actual speaking and listening with native English speakers. And by native English speakers, to manage the funds, we don't have to necessarily go all the way to recruit teachers from the UK and US. You could also look into things like Philippines teachers, or teachers from the Philippines, or even leveraging some of the artificial intelligence. I can even speak English right now in a two-way communication to my iPhone. So changing that perception of one-way communication to two-way communications, I think can help.
Thank you. Kuntop.
One thing I agree with Kun Parit is that the problem is not within the funding. I think the problem lies within the politicians themselves, that they're trying to create a short-term solution for a long-term problem, which doesn't work. Most politicians, when they come into the power, the Minister of Education, the Prime Minister, under the normal democratic government, they see the election coming up in the horizon, maybe 2 years, 3 years. They want to do something quick They want to do something fast. So they just dump in the money, give it to the teachers, give it to the parents, or creating a foundation or something, just to do a quick solution so that come next election, the teachers, we elect them again. The parents, we elect them again. So I think that the problem lies within the short solution for the long-term problem that we see is that it doesn't work. What we need is a long-term solution where whoever comes into power, don't think about re-election. You don't need credits. Don't even think about taking credits for the reforming the education, because reforming an education, it doesn't take 3 years, it doesn't take 5 years. It takes decades. It takes commitment, and it takes people who doesn't really want credits for it, but want to see the betterment of the country and the better future of the students. So I think another important thing is that you cannot expect a 70-year-old person or a 60-year-old person to chair the reforming committee. One thing that Thailand needs to change is that we need to introduce more young people into changing the system. If you want to reform the education, you ask Kun Parit, you ask the younger generation. You don't ask a 70-year-old guy, what do you think about iPad? What do you think about, do you know Bitcoin? Do you know blockchain? You need to bring the new phases into the education to reform it. And we need someone who sincerely needs to see the betterment of this country. Set a policy that it doesn't gonna last 3 years or 5 years, but a 10-year policy. I think that will solve it.
Kumpom.
Yes, to answer the question about the lack of fund and the mismanagement, I have already stated my views on education. And that's actually the 3 things that I will repeat it again, that it needs to be done to change the education system. One is the decentralization of the education. Second one is the use of IT technology to change the learning and teaching methods. And the last one is find a better quality of teachers and set proper incentives and career path. And I think that 3 is a key measure to the success of trying to work out with the problem with the lack of fund and the mismanagement. Thank you.
For the asset allocation, funding allocation, my proposal would be to bring technology to help solving this problem. How? Using big data, using direct democracy. This is not only applicable to education but to funding in general. How? You open the data. You have the principle is that government data, once it made, it should open to the public. And the government later designs which one concerns national security. Then piece by piece, it can choose to close the information, not the other way around. The current thinking is that all the information once made should be closed. Then the government pick piece by piece what piece to open to the public. That is wrong. We have to change it the other way around. By open all the public information, resource allocation included, people will scrutinize this for you. You will have more transparency, enormous transparency, and technology nowadays enable us to do that. In the past, even today, accessing information, government information, particularly bidding information, is extremely difficult. But now we can even do it real time. We can let the public see all this information real time. That's number 1. Number 2, how you can use technology to solve the problem. Direct democracy. Imagine this. Imagine a community having a limited source of funding, and they have to choose whether to invest this funding in building a bridge or upgrade a school. Technology allows this community, the people in this community, make a direct decision how to handle this one, bypassing political structure in between. Just like what technology does to other industries, bypassing the medians. So we can bypass this process and let the people allocate the resources by themselves. And this already been tried this already been done in many developed countries, and there is no reason why we cannot do it here. So direct democracy, open data, enabled by new technology.
Thank you very much. One last question. We just have time for one last one.
Thank you very much, Duong Ramon. And I prefer not to mention my organization name, because my view is not representing any organization. I'm a Thai voter, a woman. So thank you for taking my question. Since you don't have enough representative women, so I'll be over in constitutions. The current constitution drafted by the current power holder, we'll call them government, to intentionally pursue their power, and actually it would make it very difficult. That's an assumption, but actually reality isn't it? To whoever become the government, they try to weaken the parties and actually make it very difficult to work. So my question is that, what would you do with those legislation that written in the constitutions, and where you stand on the 20-year plans?
Okay.
Are you either, I would put in a bracket ... either you get rid of, or either you pursue, or in between. So that's very clear, I hope. What would you do? Because whoever the government, it will be very difficult for you to pursue your policy, because they're already a long-term plan. And also my last comments, and this is not a question, so thank you very much. You guys making Thai politics very lively today. We are waiting for this day for a long, long time, so thank you.
Thank you. Kunek, would you like to start?
ขอบคุณครับ I already made a proposal, collective pledge by all political parties. That's the only way. First, free and fair election, February 2019. Second, the rejection of the outside prime minister. Third, the change to initiate a new constitution drafting assembly. And the fourth, the amendment of the current military bill. And I cannot do it alone. We need the people of all colors to do it together. That's the only way you can amend, you can change this constitution without your party dissolved. So I don't see it another way. We got to, you see, that's one thing we make to make clear. The power to draft and to endorse a constitution belongs to the people. This have to set straight. So again, I come back to what I started in my first round. Political parties should work together on this constitution. If we work together, if we are united, no one can change this. No one can change the will of the people. But only united. If there is only single one major party not supporting this, this will not work. So we need the power of all political parties to do this. ขอบคุณครับ
Kun Pom, will you support Kun Ek's proposal?
Yes, I said my view that the 2017 constitution, it doesn't support the growing of the democracy in Thailand. And I believe that once the politics is stable, I believe that not just politicians, but the people of Thailand will see the necessity of the amendment of the constitution, because it doesn't allow the development of our country. Especially, it doesn't allow our people, our economy, and the country to grow. In other words, it's an entrapment. And actually, it's the core of the 20-year national strategy plan. Because myself, I don't believe in anyone would have that special ability to foresee the life in the next 20 years. Even the people who actually have the power or authority to draft it. You know, by the time, I'm not sure whether how many of them will be alive. You know, if you're lucky enough to invite Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, or maybe Jack Ma, you know, to be in a committee, we still can follow at the most their prediction just 10 years. That's the most that we can follow him. because beyond that, the strategy needs to change. Technology change every 6 to 12 months. So me, myself, I'm 37 years old now. I'll be the one that state my view in the parliament that I will not let anyone to make the decision what the life in the next 20 years will be for me and for my family. And especially my party has a strong standpoint on this, that we stand firm grounds on opposing this constitution, a lot of them that have some problems, and of course the 20 years national strategy plan. So that's clear for our party. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Kuntop.
Oh, wow. I see someone's excited when I'm about to take the mic.
They were very excited by what you were about to say.
Well, as in the past constitutions, the current constitutions, of course, there are flaws, there are imperfections in it. And I do agree that it needs to be amended. And like Thanatorn said, in order to amend such constitution under the new regulation, all the political parties needs to be united, because it actually clearly stated that the mechanism of amending the constitution is very, very difficult, if not next to impossible. But we agree that there are certain imperfections in it. We need to amend it, not to totally disregard it like what happened in the past. And when the time is right, when we have the general election, come the next government, that process with all the cooperations from all the political parties, we will be able to do that. Regarding the 20 years plan, we disagreed from it since the beginning, because like my colleagues, both of them said, no one is the magician who can predict what happens 20 years from now, let alone what's going to happen to Thai politics next week. And at least, but the thing is that we cannot get rid of it, unfortunately, because it has been engraved, it has been imprinted into the constitution. So we have to live with it, but what we can do about it, well, what we did was that we somehow managed to make those who are concerned make it revisable every 5 years. At the beginning, it was a solid 20-year plan, but now it's a solid 20-year plan, but need to be revised every 5 years. Well, we still disagree with it, because 5 years is an absolute millennia, according to the IT industry or many other in many other circles. But still, 5 years is still better than 20. And also, those who are involved in drafting this 20-year policy, how can you invite a 60-year-old person or 70-year-old person to draft it? How come I don't see any 20s? How come I don't see any 30s? How come I don't see any 40s or 50s in it? I mean, in 20 years from now, I will be 64. By the time, the head of the committee, he probably wouldn't even be there until the end of the committee, like what my colleague said. I mean, 20 years from now, if you're 60, you'll be 80. My father passed away at the age of 83. So you don't live forever. You need to listen. If you're going to draft the future for those who are involved, you need to let them be part of it. You need to let the 20s be part of it, because in 20 years, they're going to be 40 years old. You need the 30s to be part of it, because they're going to be 50. They're going to be the crucial part in running this country. So though we cannot get rid of it, we can do something about it. We can change the composition of the committee. We can increase the intervals where we can revise such plan. So that's my view on the 20-year.
Good night, Tim.
Yep. So there are three components of that question, right? The first was the 20-year plan. Now, for me, regardless of how good the content it may be, the idea of a 20-year plan makes no sense, right? Even the most socialist and communist societies in the past have had 5-year plans. And if I were to pose the question of, say, would you want to go back in time and let the politicians of 20 years ago make policies to govern how we live today? I don't think anyone would want to take that risk. So I think the idea of 20-year plan is not something that I am supportive of, given the fast-paced environment that we are experiencing. Point number 2 is about the Constitution, and I want to talk specifically about the special clause. I'm not sure what the bot ฉพาะการ in Thai, right? The special clause that governs the first 5 years. Interim, right? The interim. So I voted against the interim question, right, in the referendum, and it was a very easy decision, because it enabled unelected senators to have a say in who becomes the elected prime minister. And I know that the constitution has passed, the special interim constitution has passed, and it is now going to be coming into effect, even when we return to democracy. But I sincerely hope that the 250 senators that are appointed respect the wishes of the majority of the voters. I sincerely hope that, and I ask that from them. In terms of the main constitution, I also voted against the constitution in the referendum, and I think there are a few kind of issues that go against democratic principle, right? I think the most important thing that I would want to raise is the appointment of senators for the upper house. In theory, the power that the upper house, so there are two questions you need to ask when you think about the upper house. The first question is, what role does it perform that's different from what the lower house can do? Because there are democratic systems around the world where there's only one house of parliament. So the question becomes, what is the point of having an upper house? Secondly, like if you accept that there is a role for them to play, for example, the House of Lords is there to gather expertise from different academic fields in the UK to help revise and refine the law, then the power that the upper house has to be in conjunction and relate to the way that members are appointed. The more the power the upper house has, the more democratic the election of senators must be. What we're seeing in the new constitution is the upper house having a lot of power, not just to revise and refine bills passed by the lower elected house, but also to appoint members in independent organizations. Now, given the power that this upper house now has, I feel that having them appointed is not the right way to go, right? It may not necessarily be an election in the same format or in the same electoral system as the lower house, otherwise you would just have two duplicated houses. But can we have an electoral system that perhaps enables the senators to have a more democratic mandate to actually justify the power that it has? So those are my stance on 20-year plan, interim constitution, and main constitution. But 2 points I want to make about how we change it, right? Kun Thanatorn has rightly said that we would need the support of a lot of parties to enable the constitution to be changed. But what's even more worrying is that even that is not enough. I think in the past constitutions, to amend the constitution, you need a majority or a supermajority of combined houses of parliament. In this new constitution, to actually amend the rules, you not only need a majority or supermajority of the combined houses, but you actually need a minimum quota of the upper house as well, all of whom are appointed. So changing the constitution is something which is not going to be easy. So having all elected political parties in the lower house is not even enough. But number two is, as much as I disagree with this constitution and I want to see it become more democratic, we need to accept the fact that even though we're all aligned on democracy, there is still a portion of people out there who do not like elected politicians and believe that, and do not have faith in elected politicians. If the first thing we do as politicians, once elected, is to change the rules that govern the powers that politicians have, I am not sure how that group of people are going to react. There are certain groups of people who do not really care how the rules govern the country. They care more about having things to eat each day, surviving each day on an economic basis. So as much as I agree on changing the constitution, and as much I am a firm believer in democracy, no less than the three gentlemen sitting here, I believe that the immediate priority should not necessarily be on the constitution, but on what really affects the economic standards of people.
Thank you very much.
Just sorry, can I have 2 minutes?
Quickly, yeah, very quickly,
Okay.
please.
Of course, having even though all the politicals out there, the political parties out there joining this pledge, by law, it's still not doable. But I'm not talking about limitation, I'm talking about possibility. I don't see limitation, I see possibility. If all political parties agree to this, it's the very first big step forward. It opens the door to the possibility, because only us has the legitimacy of the people. Other organizations, other independent organizations, the Senate, the upper house, they don't have the legitimacy. Only us that representing the people in the parliament. So it is the first big step to go forward. And after this, if I am allowed to do political activities, I will knock doors electronically. I would prefer, but physically, one by one. I will do it, to get this consensus from all political parties.
Thank you. Just one last comment, Kun Pom.
Yes, really support his Kun Thanatorn, and that's the idea in the head. But I'm telling you that, as many of us may already know about the Constitution, it seems to be impossible to amend it, as it required, 1/3 of the senator support, and it required about 20% of the opposition. So in order to do that, you need a lot of support. And from my experience in the last parliament, I was one of the 248, which the appointed Senate, signed a petition asking the Constitutional Court to rule on my intention to amend the Constitution which regarding the appointment of Senate. We're trying to bring back it to election for the Senate for the election, but that didn't happen. So I'm telling you that with the context of last time and this time is even harder, and maybe we need the new Democrat to help too if you want a success.
Thank you. Very quickly, please.
I completely support changing the Constitution because I rejected the Constitution in the first place. All I'm saying is that it might not be the immediate agenda once the elected government gets in.
Listen, a big thank you to all of our guests, and just before we thank them, a reminder to those of you who are not members, join the club, please. We need your membership. Next week, Tuesday, North Korea. You won't get another discussion like that anywhere else. Do come, please.